Hello Divi Nation and welcome. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing 6 Divi technical techniques for creating flat web design with Divi. These are the final results we're aiming to achieve. So without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do here is to create a brand new page. So I'm going to come over here to Pages and click on Add New. Next, we're going to give this page a name. So I'm just going to call this Mac 6. Click on Use Divi Builder. And then I'm going to choose Build from Scratch. So what we need to do here is I'm going to close this and then go into my section settings. I'm going to click here on this gear icon to access my section settings. Click on Background because we need to add a background gradient. So I'm going to click the second tab, click the plus button and add my first color. Now, if you want to use the same colors as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. Okay, so I'm going to add my color here. And then I need to add my second color. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is to make sure our gradient type is set to linear. And for the gradient direction, we need to set this at 146. And the start position needs to be at 30%. Next, we need to add some top padding and bottom padding. So I'm going to come over here to Design, Spacing. And for the top padding, I need to enter 50, 55. And then for the bottom, it's going to be 130. Okay, so that's all we need to do for now. So I'm going to go ahead now and save. And then over here, I need to add my rows. So I'm going to click this plus button and we need one column. So I'm going to select one column. Next, we need to make this row full width. So I'm just going to close this for now and then click this gear icon for our rows. So now I'm in my row settings. So I'm going to click on Design, Sizing, and I'm going to make this full width. So I'm going to click here to activate it. Okay, so with this set, I'm going to go ahead now and save. And then next we need to add a text module. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my text module and select it. So I'm just going to get rid of some of this text. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is to make sure that this text is a heading text. So I'm going to select all the text, click the drop down and set it to heading 1. Now it's time to make some adjustments to this. So I'm going to click the Design tab, click on Heading Text. So the first thing I need to do here is to change my heading font to Arial. So I'm going to select it here. And for the text alignment, it needs to be left. So I'm going to select left. And then the next thing we need to do is to change this color to white. So I'm going to select my white color here so I can read the text. Next, it's time to enter our heading text size. So first of all, here we're going to set it up as 86. And we might as well enter the sizes for the tablets and the smartphone. So I'm going to click this little icon here. Click the tablet tab, and here for the tablet, this needs to be set at 65. And then for the smartphone, this needs to be set at 45. And then back over here to my desktop. Next, we need to adjust our line height. So I'm going to set this at 1.2. So now there is enough space between the lines so we can read that easily. Right, so we are done for now. Next, we need to add a new row. So I'm going to save this, come over here, click this plus button, and our row needs to have one column as well. So I'm going to select that. Now we need to make this row full width. So I'm going to come over here to my row settings, click on Design, Sizing. We're going to set this to full width. And also we need to set our gutter width. So first of all, we need to activate it. So I'm going to come over here to use gutter width and we're going to set this to 1. So the reason why we've entered 1 for our gutter width is so that we don't have any space between the content that we have in that row. Right, so we're going to go ahead and save and then we're going to add a divider module. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my divider, select it. Now I'm going to add my divider color. So I'm going to come over here to Design, Color, and then I'm going to click here on this eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Now, if you want to use the same colors, I will leave a link to the post in the description below so you can use the exact same colors and values that I'm using throughout this tutorial. Okay, so the next thing we need to do now is to add our divider weight and it's going to be 10 pixels. So I'm going to come over here to Sizing, Divider Weight, set this to 10. Our width needs to be set at 64 and our module alignment needs to be set to right. So I'm going to select that. So for now, we're going to save. And then next we need to add another row. So I'm going to click here on this plus button and this time we need 2 columns. So I'm going to select them. And then we need to go into our row settings. Again, as we did before, click here on this gear icon to access my row settings. Click on Design. And we're also going to make this full width. So I'm going to come over here to Sizing and activate Make this row full width. Right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to remove the padding on the top and also on the bottom. So I'm going to come over here to spacing and activate my chain because I need to enter my padding both for the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add 0 like that. So now my padding has been applied to the top and bottom. Right, so for now we're done. I'm going to add a text module now on column 2. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my text module, select it, and I'm just going to enter my text here for the description. Right, so let's go into the design tab. So over here, we're going to change our text font to Georgia. So I'm going to click here on this drop down and search for Georgia. I'm going to select it, change the text color to white because right now we can't read it. So I'm going to select it. And for our text size, right now as it is, it's a bit too small. So let's increase the size to about 27. And we also need to go in and enter our sizes for the tablet and the phone and the smartphone. So I'm going to click this little tab here. Click on the tablet tab, and this needs to be 22, and for the smartphone this needs to be set at 18. Right, so back over here, the next thing we need to do is to adjust our line height because as you can see this text is way too close. These lines are way too close together, so we can fix that by adding a text line height of 1.9. Right, so the next thing we need to do is to make sure our text orientation is set to right. Right, so for now we're going to save, and then we also need to add a button module here. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my button is right here. So in this button, we're just going to say get in touch. We're going to give this a blank link, and then we're going to come over here to the design tab. Now what we need to do, now this text here is aligned to the right, so we want to make sure that this button here is also aligned to the right. So I'm going to come over here to alignment and align my button to the right. Now let's enter our button settings. So to do that, we need to come over here to button and activate use custom styles for button because this gives us the access now to make further customizations to our button. So let's start off with our text size. So I'm going to come over here and add 27 as my button text size. And then I'm going to add my button text color. So I'm going to click here on this eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Next, I need to add my button background color. So I'm going to click this plus button, paste my color in here. So if you want to use the same colors as I'm using in this tutorial, again, I'm just reminding you that I'm going to leave a link to the post in the description below. Right, so next we need to come over here to our button border width, and we're going to set that at 0. So I'm going to scroll down here, set this at 0, and also the button border radius, this needs to also be set 0. Right, so for the button font, we need to keep our consistency here with our body text. So we're going to change this to Georgia. I'm going to click this drop down and select Georgia. Right, so that's all we need to do here for this button. So I'm going to go ahead now and save. So the next stage now is to add another section. So I'm going to click this plus button. Now this is going to be a regular section. So for now, I'm just going to close this because we need to add our top and bottom padding to this. So I'm going to come over here to the left and click on my section settings, click on design, spacing, and I'm going to add my top padding, and my top padding is going to be 155 and my bottom padding is going to be 200. And then I'm going to save. Now it's time to add my column structure. So I'm going to come over here and add my row first. So I'm going to click this plus button, and this time we need 3 equal thirds. So next we need to add some colors to our background. So I'm going to close this for now, and then I'm going to click here on my row settings. Click on background. So we're going to start off with column 1 background. So I'm going to click here on this plus button. In fact, I need my second tab here because we need to add a gradient. Okay, so I'm going to click the plus button. So my first color, I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to paste my second color. Now this second color is going to be an RGBA value. So I'm going to drag this slider down a little bit so I can get access to my brackets. So I'm going to paste here my RGBA value. And then next, I need to add my gradient type. So by default, it's set on linear. So we need to set this to radial. Right, so for column 1 start position, we're going to set this at 45. And for our end position, this is also going to be 45. And then we're going to save. Next, we're going to come over here to our row settings. Click on design. And we're going to make this full width as we did before with the rest of the rows. So I'm going to click here on sizing, make this row full width. And then we're going to come over here to use custom gutter width, and we're going to set this to 1. Right, so what we need to do now is we're going to add a divider. So now the reason why we're adding a divider here is so that we can see our background image here. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my divider. I want to select it. So this time we don't want to show the divider because we just want to show the shape that's behind this column. So we're going to come over here to design, spacing, and we are going to add a margin of 150 to the top. So you'll notice in a minute, once I add my margins, that shape we've just added, it will be like a complete circle. Right, so for the bottom, I need to add 150 pixels as well. So now we have our complete circle, which is great. So we might as well add our values for the tablet and the smartphone. So I'm going to click this little icon here, click on the tablet tab, and then this time, as you can see here, it's cut off. So we need to add 200 here, like that, 200 to the bottom. So now we have a complete circle. And let's just double check what's happening here on the smartphone tab. Okay, so that's fine. So let's leave that as it is. So I'm back here on my desktop. So now we need to go back to the row settings. So I'm going to save this for now. Click here on this row settings icon. Click on design, spacing. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a top margin of -350. So I'm going to set my top margin here. And for the tablet and smartphone, this needs to be at -400. So I'm going to click here on this little icon, click on the tablet tab, add my -400 here. And that's going to be the same for the smartphone as well. Okay. So next we need to add our left margin. So for our left margin, this is going to be a -250 pixels. And for our tablet and smartphone, this is going to be -400. So I'm just going to add -400 in here and make sure it's the same for the smartphone as well. Great. So back here on the tablet tab. Right, so now it's time to add our second row. So I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to come over here and add another row. And this time I'm going to choose a single column. So I'm going to close this for now and go into my row settings. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove the padding on the top. So I'm going to click here on design, spacing. So for padding top, I'm going to add a 0 to this. So we're done with this. I'm going to save. And then I'm going to come over here and add a text module. So I'm going to click this plus button, search for my text module, select it. And then over here, I'm just going to add my dummy text. And I need to make sure that this text is set as a heading. So I'm going to click this drop down and set this to heading 2. Okay, so now it's time to make some further adjustments. So I'm going to click on this design tab. And then I'm going to come over here to the heading text. And I'm going to choose Arial as my font. Text alignment, this needs to be centered. And for our heading text color, I'm just going to come over here and click this eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Right, so over here on the heading text size, I'm going to set this at 50. And then for the tablet and smartphone, I might as well just add my values here. So I'm going to click on the tablet tab. And here it's going to be 45. And for the smartphone, it needs to be set at 32. Great. Now it's time to adjust the line height. So over here, it's by default, it's set at 1 EM. So I need to enter 1.3. Okay, so that's much better now. Next, I need to add a divider module. So I'm just going to save this for now. And then over here, I'm going to click this plus button to add my module. And my module is going to be a divider. So I'm going to select it. So now let's give the divider a color. So I'm going to come over here to design, color, and I'm going to click this eyedropper tool and paste my color in here. Next, we're going to come over here to the sizing, and we're going to change the divider weight to 10 and the width to 30%. And then we're going to align this to the center. And then we're going to save. Now over here, we also need to make sure our text here, our heading text is also centered. So I'm just going to center it like that. And there's one thing I haven't added here, and that is my size. So I'm going to come back over here to my heading text. And this is heading 2. This needs to be set at 50 pixels. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to save. Right, so for the next stage now, I need to add another row. So I'm going to come over here and click this plus button. And this time we're going to need 4 quarters. So I'm going to save, I'm going to click on that. So for now, I'm going to close this because what we need to do is to use the same gradient as we used in the hero image here. So I'm going to click here on my section settings, click on background, and then I'm just going to right click and copy background gradient. And then I'm just going to close this. And then over here, we're going to go to the background one. So I'm going to click on row settings, click on background, So on background 1, I'm going to click the second tab and then I'm going to paste my background gradient, just like that. I'm going to save that and then we're also going to do the same here. So this time we need to go to column 3, background, like that. Okay, so now we have the same background as we have here on the section, both on column 1 and column 3. So now I'm going to save and then we need to go over here to our row settings. We're going to make this row full width. So I'm going to click here on design, sizing, and then I'm going to click on make this row full width. Next, we're going to come over here to the gutter width and set this to 1 so that we don't have any spaces between these columns. Right, the next stage now is to add our margins. So I'm going to come over here to spacing. So for the top margin, I'm going to add 100 pixels. And then for the top and bottom padding, this is going to be set at 0. So if you haven't noticed here, I've activated my chain so that my value will be added both to the top and bottom easily. Right, so the next stage now is to start adding all our content. So I'm going to save this for now and then I'm going to click this plus button here on the first column and add my blurb. Okay, so I'm going to select my blurb and then I'm going to come over here to image and icon because we need an icon over here. So I'm going to activate this button here which says use icon and I'm going to choose my icon. So the one I'm going to go with is this one here. Next, we need to go to the icon settings. So I'm going to click here on design, image and icon, and we're going to add our color for our icon. So I'm going to paste it in here like that. Next, we're going to come over here to our text settings. We're going to make sure that this is centered and we need to change our text color from dark to light. So because as you can see here, we can't read what's in there. So I'm going to click here on this drop down and turn this to light. Next, I'm going to come over here to my title text settings. I'm going to make sure my font is set to Arial and the text size is set to 31. And for my line height, I'm going to set this at 2.6 EM. Next, let's come over here to our body text. So for our body text, we're going to change this font to Georgia. So I'm going to click here on the drop down and because I've used it before, it's going to be right up there on the top. So I'm going to select it and my body text size is going to be set at 18. And for my line height, I'm going to set this at 2.2. So as you can see, my text is way too close to the edges here. So I need to fix that by adding some padding. So I'm going to start off by going to the top and bottom padding. So I'm going to go to spacing. So first of all, I'm going to activate my chain so my padding can be applied both to the top and the bottom. So that's 50 pixels, both to the top and bottom. And I also need to add some padding to the left and right. So again, I'm going to activate my chain and add my left and right padding, just like that. So as you can see, that looks much better now. So that's all we need to do here. In fact, before I move away from this, I need to go back here into the title and just give it like a description. Okay, so we're going to call this service and then I'm going to save. So now that we've added all our settings to this, all we need to do now is to clone this and drag this over to other columns. Okay, so as you can see, the background here is white and our text is white, so we can't see what is happening here. So what we need to do is to go in and make some adjustments to our blurb module. So I'm going to click here on module settings. So first of all, I need to change my icon. So I'm going to come over here to image and icon. And this time I need my icon facing up. So I'm going to select that. We're also going to change the icon color. So I'm going to click here on design, image and icon, and I'm going to change my color. And then I'm going to paste my value in here. So because our text color right now is light on a light background, we need to change that. So I'm going to come over here to text, change this from light to dark. So now we can read it. So next we're going to come over here to sizing. Okay, so our sizes here are fine. So next I'm going to go to spacing. And for the top margin, I'm going to set this at 100. And then for my tablet and smartphone, I'm going to set this at 0. So I'm going to click here on the tablet tab, set this at 0. And for the smartphone, that's going to be 0 as well. So as you can see, now this looks much better on those devices. Okay, back over here on the desktop. So what we need to do now is to add a box shadow here. So I'm going to come over here to box shadow and I'm going to choose this one here. Right, so let's come over here to our blur strength. So over here, I'm going to set my blur strength at 80. So the spread strength is going to be -10. And then I'm going to come over here to my shadow color, click on the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to paste my values between these brackets right here, like that. Right, so now that we have those two designs, the last thing we need to do now is to clone this one more time and place it in the right columns. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Drag this into column 3. And then I'm going to clone this as well. And this is going to go to column 4. And pretty much this is our final design. Okay, so I'm going to save this page and then you're going to do a quick preview. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching and see you soon.